I knew something was wrong the second my key wouldn't turn. It was a cold Monday morning in January, the kind of day where the sky hung low and the air tasted like steel. I had just come back from the hospital, still wearing the same jeans I'd put on 2 days ago, still carrying the overnight bag I had thrown together when Daniel collapsed. The flowers in my hand, roses and lilies from his coworkers, were wilted, their scent already turning bitter. My eyes were swollen, my lips cracked. I hadn't slept. I had watched my husband die 12 hours earlier, and I wasn't ready to face the silence of our home. But what I saw instead was something else entirely. I stepped onto the porch, slid my key into the lock, and met resistance. I tried again. Nothing. My heart thudded. I pulled out the spare key from behind the loose porch stone. Still nothing. It was like the lock had rejected me. And then I saw the curtains. The white linen ones I had hemmed by hand were gone, replaced by heavy velvet in a loud floral pattern I would never choose. I moved closer, squinting through a narrow slit between the fabric and wall. Boxes. Cardboard towers filled the living room, where our bookshelf and sofa used to be. A pink throw pillow sat where Daniel always rested his back, a delicate teacup on the coffee table. And then I saw her. Elaine. My mother-in-law. She was wearing a navy cardigan and sipping from my wedding china tea I recognized as my own. Across from her, folding a blanket, was Chloe, Daniel's younger sister. They were laughing. They had moved in, as if I had never existed, as if Daniel hadn't died. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder, fists trembling. Finally, the door creaked open. Elaine stood there, arms folded, eyes calm, as if she had been rehearsing this moment. "Lydia," she said, tilting her head. "Didn't expect you so soon." "What's going on?" I asked. "Why can't I open the door?" She gave me a smile that froze the air around us. "Because, dear," she said, "you don't live here anymore." I stood there, frozen on the porch, staring at Elaine like she had just spoken a different language. "You don't live here anymore." The words echoed in my head, slow and cruel. "I'm his wife," I whispered. "We bought this house together. I refinanced it when his business collapsed." Elaine's smile didn't budge. If anything, it sharpened. "Daniel paid for this house. My son, not you. There was no prenup, no child, and frankly, no real contribution on your part. This house belongs to his family, his real family." I should have screamed. I should have pushed it towards her. But my voice was gone, buried under the weight of disbelief. My hands were shaking, my breath shallow. Behind her, Chloe appeared, carrying 2 of my ceramic serving plates, the ones Daniel and I picked out at that little shop in Asheville on our first anniversary. "You left the side door unlocked when you rushed to the hospital," she said with a shrug. "We figured you wouldn't mind." They were acting like I was a guest, a mistake. But they didn't know everything. 2 years earlier, almost to the day, Daniel had sat on this very porch, hands in his hair, eyes full of fear. His startup had failed. The bank froze his accounts. He couldn't even look at me when he said, "They might take the house, Lydia." He wasn't a weak man. But that day I saw him break. The next morning I quietly went to the credit union. I used the nest egg built from my old interior design work, the money no one knew I had, to refinance the house under my name. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell anyone. Especially not Elaine. She would have called it proof of his failure. The process took weeks. I picked up freelance jobs. I made the payments. I kept the lights on, the roof from leaking, and our life from crumbling. And I never said a word. Elaine never knew. But she was about to find out. That night, I didn't go back. I drove without thinking, the steering wheel slick beneath my fingers. The bouquet of wilted flowers still sat on the passenger seat like a joke. I ended up at a roadside motel just off Route 41, the kind that smelled like bleach and faint regret. I used the emergency credit card Daniel had tucked in the back of his wallet, the only one still active. 3 nights, paid in full. The room was small, stale air, thin sheets. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bag I had packed in a rush when Daniel collapsed. So there were no clothes inside, just hospital paperwork, my phone charger, a half-read novel, and the voicemail he left me the night before his heart stopped. I played it twice. His voice was calm, teasing me to get some rest, telling me he'd be fine. Then I turned off my phone and curled up in a bed that smelled nothing like home. Sleep never came. The next morning, I sat upright for hours, staring at the blank ceiling, fingers sore from gripping the sheets all night. And then, somewhere between grief and rage, I picked up the phone. St. Jude Memorial Chapel. This is Marlene speaking. Yes, I said, voice firmer than I felt. This is Lydia Bennett. I need to update the guest list for Daniel Bennett's service. Of course, Mrs. Bennett. What changes would you like to make? I didn't hesitate. Please remove Elaine Bennett and Chloe Bennett from the list. A pause, then a quiet, professional, understood. I ended the call before she could ask why. It wasn't vengeance, not yet. It was a boundary. The first one I had drawn in years. The first one with a line so clear even Elaine couldn't step over it, without knowing she'd crossed something sacred. And in that small, quiet moment alone in a motel room with peeling wallpaper and cold coffee, I felt something new bloom inside me. Not peace, not yet. But power. The kind that grows when you finally say no. Tuesday afternoon, I drove back to the house not through the front, but around the block, slipping behind the row of hedges that separated our backyard from the neighbor's garden. Elaine's car wasn't in the driveway, no sign of Chloe either. The side door, the one from the laundry room, had always had a faulty latch. Daniel meant to fix it for months. He never did. I slipped it open without a sound. Inside, everything smelled wrong. Lavender air freshener, the kind Elaine loved, my photos gone. Landscape prints I didn't recognize now lined the hallway. Even the throw pillows on the couch had been rearranged. The corner where Daniel used to sit blanket mug. The faint scent of aftershave was stripped bare. But I wasn't here to mourn. I was here to remember. Daniel's office was in the back of the house, tucked between the laundry and the guest room. Elaine used to call it that digital junkyard filled with wires and receipts and the scent of coffee and cologne. She hated it. Which is exactly why I figured she hadn't touched it. I was right. It was just as he left it, chaotic in a way only he understood. Labeled flash drives. Sticky notes in all caps. Receipts organized by year, but never by vendor. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence wrap around me like armor. Then I started searching. Top drawer, receipts from a freelance consulting job. Middle drawer, old business cards, a half-eaten mint, a note to cancel a dentist appointment. And then I saw it. A black folder wedged between two instruction manuals. Across the top, in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting. Postnup, do not discard. My breath caught. We never signed a prenup. We'd married in our 30s, broke but trusting. Daniel once joked that legal paperwork killed the romance. But apparently he'd changed his mind. I opened the folder carefully. 3 pages. Legal letterhead, signed 2 years ago. A clause highlighted in yellow. In the event of the husband's passing, all jointly owned assets, including real estate, are to be transferred wholly to Lydia Bennett, unless otherwise specified in a last will and testament. There was no will. But this was binding. And behind the documents, folded in half, was a handwritten note. If Mom tries anything, show this to your lawyer. You know how she is. Keep this safe, Lydia. I didn't cry. Not then. I smiled. Wednesday afternoon, I was halfway through a bowl of instant soup in the motel kitchenette when someone knocked. 3 sharp raps, the kind of knock that didn't ask it expected. I peered through the curtain. Elaine. Standing outside in a fitted black coat like she'd just walked off the set of a soap opera. Next to her stood a man with a clipboard, square jaw, polished shoes, lawyer, obviously. I didn't invite them in. Instead, I zipped my coat, tucked the folder under my arm, and stepped outside. We met in the parking lot, where the wind whipped her scarf sideways. Lydia, Elaine said smoothly, flashing that razor-thin smile. This is Mr. Langley, my family attorney. We're here to discuss next steps regarding the house. Next steps? I repeated, flat. Yes, she nodded, as if we were negotiating property lines and not grieving the same man. Since Daniel left no will, his estate, including the house, is subject to division among next of kin. As his mother and sister, I'm his wife, I cut in, the only legal spouse. Langley cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Well, yes, however, in the absence of a testamentary directive, probate law allows. I'm actually glad you're both here, I said calmly. Saves me a trip. I pulled out the black folder and held it up. Elaine's smile cracked. "This is a notarized postnuptial agreement," I said. "Signed 3 years ago. 2 witnesses. Legal letterhead. It transfers all shared assets to me in the event of Daniel's death." Langley extended a hand. "May I see?" "No," I said, stepping back. "You'll get a copy through official channels. I've already retained counsel." Elaine's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I replied, tilting my head. "If I'm bluffing, you should feel confident enough to walk away and celebrate. But if I'm not, then you've broken into my house, tampered with my property, and removed personal items from a residence you have no legal claim to." Langley stepped slightly away from her. Elaine's voice dropped. "I see now. You were never part of this family. You stole my son." "No," I said, calm and quiet. "You pushed him away the second he stopped living by your script." Then I turned and walked back into my room. I didn't look back. By Friday morning, the motel room felt like it had absorbed my grief. The air was thick with old coffee and unopened mail. I was sitting at the tiny fold-out table, trying to focus on the funeral seating chart, when I noticed the envelope. No stamp, no return address, just slipped under the door during the night. Inside was a letter from the Chatham County Probate Court. My name printed in bold at the top, Lydia Bennett, respondent. I read the first few lines. "To whom it may concern, this court has received a formal petition filed by Mrs. Elaine Bennett, mother of the late Daniel Bennett, challenging the validity of the property transfer and postnuptial agreement." She was accusing me of coercion, of manipulating Daniel, of taking advantage of a man too emotionally fragile to know what he was signing. I dropped the letter like it burned. Not because it scared me, because it insulted everything I had done to keep him afloat. The rage that crept in wasn't loud. It was slow, heavy, cold, the kind that fills your lungs and refuses to leave. I picked up the phone and called Angela Flores, my old college roommate, now a real estate attorney in Savannah. "I figured you'd call," she said before I could even speak. "She's claiming I forced him to sign it," I said. Angela stayed calm. It's what people do when they have no legal ground. They sling mud and hope something sticks. "She wants to erase everything," I whispered. "Not just the house. Us?" "She wants control," Angela corrected. "This was never about property. It's about power." I stared at the edge of the motel table, my hand clenched around the phone. "I want to fight her," I said. "Not just stop her. I want to destroy her." Angela didn't flinch. "Good," she said, voice like steel wrapped in silk. "But we do it smart. You don't speak to her. You don't engage. Let me build this brick by brick." We hung up. I sat in silence, breathing through the fury. And then, suddenly I remembered something. One night, 3 months before he died, Daniel had come home pale and quiet after a client meeting. He'd forgotten where he parked, forgotten a client's name. "I have a neurology appointment at St. Michael's next week," he had said, brushing it off, just to rule things out. I hadn't gone with him. I scrambled to my suitcase, tore through documents, mortgage receipts, bank statements, insurance letters. And then I found it. Still sealed. A letter from St. Michael's Neurology Clinic. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "Dear Mr. Bennett, following your recent cognitive assessment, we are pleased to inform you that your results fall within the normal range. No signs of early cognitive decline were detected." I exhaled, long and deep. She was building a case. But I had just found my defense. Monday morning. 1 week since Daniel died. 5 days since Elaine filed the petition. 72 hours since I found the neurologist's letter. The courthouse on Montgomery Street was cold. Polished marble floors, echoing shoes, and a silence that hummed with tension. Angela met me on the steps, hair in a tight bun, folder in hand, eyes sharp. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. And I was. For the first time since Daniel collapsed, I wasn't drowning. I was standing. Inside, the courtroom wasn't full, just a scattering of people and too much air. Elaine sat in the front row, dressed in black lace like she was starring in a play about loss. Chloe beside her, head bowed in practiced mourning. Mr. Langley, clipboard lawyer, stood at their side. Angela and I sat at the respondents' table. My palms were cold but steady. I didn't come to beg. I came to defend the truth. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver glasses and no time for nonsense, called us to order. Langley spoke first. He painted Elaine as a concerned mother, raised questions about Daniel's state of mind, talked of emotional vulnerability, never said the word coercion, but let it linger like smoke. Elaine even cried, right on cue. Then it was Angela's turn. She didn't raise her voice, didn't perform. She laid out facts like bricks. A notarized postnup, signed and witnessed. A mortgage deed in my name. Bank records showing I paid every bill for 2 years. And finally, the letter from St. Michael's, signed, dated, sealed. This confirms Mr. Bennett was of sound mind, she said, 3 months before his death. The room stilled. Langley stammered, tried to shift. Even so, Your Honor, we must consider the emotional dynamics. Do you have medical evidence? The judge asked. He hesitated. No, Your Honor. Then I see no grounds, she said firmly. The postnuptial agreement is legally binding. The deed is in Mrs. Bennett's name. The house belongs to her. Case dismissed. The gavel hit like thunder. I didn't cheer. I didn't even smile. I just exhaled slow and steady, the kind of breath you don't realize you've been holding until the war is over. Tuesday, 1 week since Daniel's heart gave out. The chapel smelled like lilies and cedar polish. The service was set for noon, but by 11:15, the pews were already filling. Friends, neighbors, a few of Daniel's old clients. Some had driven in from Atlanta, others from Charleston. Most hadn't seen us in years, but they came. I'm so sorry, they whispered. He loved you so much. Always talked about your garden. Said you were the calm in his chaos. I smiled gently, nodded, accepted their grief like a folded flag. Angela arrived just before 11:30. She didn't come as my lawyer this time, just a friend. She sat in the front pew, said nothing. She didn't need to. The musicians tuned quietly in the corner. The minister flipped through his notes. Daniel's urn sat at the front, wrapped in blue velvet, his favorite color. I had chosen it myself. And then I saw them. 2 shadows slipping in at the very back. Elaine and Chloe. Dressed in black, veils pinned, mourning costumes perfect and practiced. They weren't on the guest list. I had made sure of that. The funeral home had promised they'd be stopped. But someone must have looked away. And now there they were pretending to belong. My pulse pounded. Not from grief. From fury. I had buried Daniel once. I would not let them use his death for dignity they hadn't earned. Angela leaned in. Want me to handle it? I shook my head. No, this one's mine. I walked slowly down the aisle. Every head turned. Even the minister stepped aside. When I reached the back, Elaine looked up, smiling faintly. You're not supposed to be here, I said quietly. We're not leaving, she whispered. I gave birth to him. Then you should have respected his wishes. I'm his mother. And I'm his wife, I said firmly. The only one he chose. She squared her shoulders. You can't stop me from mourning. You're not mourning, I said. You're performing. Then I added, calm and clear, if you don't leave, I'll walk out, with the minister, with the urn. I'll finish the service in a parking lot if I have to, but you won't rewrite him here. Silence. Then Chloe's voice, small but steady. Mom, let's go. Elaine turned, stunned. We're not wanted here, Chloe said, standing. Let's stop pretending. And just like that, they left. No scene, no fight. Only the soft click of the chapel door closing behind them. I returned to the front. And for the first time in days, I said goodbye to Daniel in peace. The day after the funeral, the house was silent. Not the comforting kind of silence, but the kind that sits with you, watches you, waits for you to break. I stood at the kitchen sink in Daniel's old sweatshirt, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I hadn't moved. Outside the window, the garden was bare. Just turned soil and dormant beds rows of nothing, waiting for something to begin. I turned around slowly, half expecting to see him at the kitchen table, humming off key, legs kicked up like he always did. But the chair was empty. The silence was mine now. I had survived court, survived the funeral. But the house still held shadows. That morning, I found his old gardening notebook tucked behind a pile of cables in the office. The one where he'd scribbled dreams of wild marigolds and rosemary hedges. He had labeled each seed doodled layouts, even taped down a packet with a note in his handwriting. For Lyde, when you're ready. I wasn't ready. But I went outside anyway. I dug my hands into the earth, turned the soil, planted every seed he left for me. Marigolds, mint, lavender. I watered them gently and sat beside the beds as the sun sank low. For a while I forgot the lawsuits, the court, the argument in the chapel. I just sat with the dirt under my nails and the scent of earth rising around me. When I came back to the house that night, something was waiting on the front step. An envelope. Plain white, no stamp, no handwriting, just 6 words printed in bold type. This house will always be mine. I stared at it for a long time. And then I laughed. Not out of bitterness. Not from anger. But something lighter, something that felt like release. She had no claim left, no power, no presence. Just 6 words from a woman already erased from my wedding, my grief, my future. I walked out to the garden. Dug a hole under the marigold bed. Buried the letter deep. Covered it with earth. With earth. Maybe something good will grow from it, I whispered. Then I made myself tea. With cinnamon. Because Daniel always said grief needed something sweet. Spring came early that year. The air smelled like lemon blossoms and turned earth. The garden outside, once nothing but empty soil, and Daniel's scribbled dreams, was finally waking up. Each morning I stood by the window, coffee in hand, wrapped in his old flannel shirt, watching the green rise. The marigolds came first, bright, stubborn bursts of orange like tiny suns. Then came the mint, the rosemary, the lavender. I didn't hear from Elaine again. Not a letter, not a knock, not a parked car across the street. Whether it was the court order, the garden, or simply the truth finally sinking in, I didn't know. I didn't care. She became a shadow in the rear view. The house changed with the seasons. I painted the guest room sage green, replaced the photos she'd hung with ones that belonged Daniel by the lake. Our dog Max, a sunset we once chased. I left one drawer in the office untouched, not as a shrine, as a promise. Some nights, I sat by the garden bench, beneath the maple tree he once wanted to hang wind chimes from, and I spoke to him, not to grieve, but to remember. I also went back to work not because I had to, because I chose to. Interior design, one project at a time. A grieving widow who needed her kitchen to feel less like his, a young woman starting over, a retired couple building a sunroom for orchids. I didn't tell them everything, just enough to help them reclaim their space. And when someone a stranger at the market, a woman at church, asked how I got through it all, I told them, you don't owe anyone access to your peace. You're not selfish for locking your doors. Sometimes, something beautiful grows where your world once ended. That's not a metaphor. That's survival.